I want to introduce Julie Brill, FTC Commissioner. We're going to have an informal chat ahead of our official session, which is later today, which I think will be the most entertaining IoT session in all of South by's history.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That will be at 3:30 with Michelle Dennedy and Ruby Zeffo,
Yep.
and yourself.
And me, and you.
And me. I'm just going to be sitting on stage and letting you guys do all the talking.
Works for us, works for us.
So we're going to talk just a little bit here about that panel, but we're also going to talk a little bit about your first time at South by. This
Sure.
is your first time.
Right, absolutely.
Other than us inviting you, why did you come and what are you looking for?
So it's great to be here. Is this mic on? How are we doing?
You guys
Okay,
hear us? You
great.
guys okay?
So it's fabulous to be here. Thank you to CMS Passcode for inviting me. You know, I really enjoy interacting on the ground with the tech community. There's so much going on in tech, and there's so much that we need to know because we're the ones at the FTC, among other federal agencies, who are thinking about how to deal with things like IoT, how to deal with big data, how to deal with discrimination in data, how to deal with fairness in data. And in order to do that and to do it well, we have to know what's actually happening, how data is being used, what kind of technology is being used, and how that impacts consumers. We also do a lot in terms of data flows overseas, whether it's Europe or Asia, and it's important to know kind of what the tech community is thinking about those kind of data flows. So I come to learn, I come to listen, I come to be entertained, and hopefully to get some information that's going to help me in my job.
So I mean, one of the things the FTC is doing, which you touched on briefly, is trying to do more outreach into the startup community, right?
Absolutely.
So you have Start with Security?
Starts with Security, absolutely.
What is that?
So Starts with Security is a program that we have had, we've had 3 events and a lot of publications. It's our effort to reach developers and to say to developers, you need to be thinking about security from the get-go. You don't want to start thinking about security when you are about to be purchased and it's a big moment for you, and then suddenly your investors or the folks who are looking at you say, yeah, what about security? What have you been doing? And then you got to retrofit everything. That's a terrible time to be thinking about security. So and this comes from our cases, this comes from our policy work, and what we've done is we've had 3 events, we'll have more. We had one here in Austin, we had one in Seattle, we had one in Silicon Valley. We're going around the country and we're talking to developers directly, and we're saying, here are the things you need to know about defense in depth. Here are the things you need to know about security in depth. Here are the things you need to know about the regulators and what regulators are thinking about, so that they can begin, again, from the beginning, when they're just starting, they can be thinking about security. That's the safest way, not only for them and their business, but also for their consumers.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, there's all this really cool stuff here, right? From virtual reality to 3D printing.
AI, absolutely.
Where do you think, when you talk about the innovation landscape,
right?
What are the areas where people aren't thinking about privacy and security enough that you're seeing that are emerging now?
So to preview what we're going to talk about this afternoon, one of our biggest concerns is that connected devices and the manufacturers of connected devices are not thinking enough about security. You know, there have been studies done about how much data is flowing over connected devices. I mean, you're talking about a huge geometric increase in the amount of data. It's linkable or it's personal. It's linkable to individuals or it's personal about them. And 70% of that information is flowing over unencrypted networks. This is scary because it's not just the vulnerability of the data and information about consumers that is going to be much more personal, right? When you talk about wearables, you're talking about biometric information. You know, you're talking about real information in their home. This is really personal information, and it's growing exponentially. So you're not just talking about the vulnerability of that data, but you're also talking about this is a vector vulnerability to an entire system and vulnerability of the devices themselves, whether it's a connected car or whether it's a connected medical device. I mean, these are things that can affect safety well beyond just data.
So before I go buy a Fitbit or a Nest or any other sort of connected device, as a consumer, what are the things I should be thinking about and doing?
Well, it would be really good if you could determine what kind of controls you're given with respect to that device, and also try to figure out where else that company is sending the information. I mean, it's one thing if they're using the information for the purpose of, providing you with like, okay, here's how many calories you burned, here's what you should or shouldn't eat. I mean, that's sort of all within the context of why you bought that wearable. But if that information is going outside to ad networks or to analytics firms that are going to use it for other purposes, or to data brokers, that's something I think consumers should know and they should have some control over. Unfortunately, I think there are many providers of these devices that don't make that clear to consumers, how much information is flowing outside the context of what consumers would expect.
You brought up data brokers. That's something that you focus on a lot.
Right.
I wonder if you could just for a minute explain what a data broker is for those who don't know.
Sure.
And then what you think we should be doing from a regulatory point of view to sort of shed more light and bring transparency to that market.
So data brokers, one of the reasons why I've been focusing on it for over 5 years is because data brokers are a very important part of the data ecosystem, but completely invisible to consumers. Consumers have no idea that data brokers exist. What they do is they obtain information, whether offline or online, they onboard it, they combine it, and create very sensitive profiles about individuals. Hundreds of millions of consumers in the United States have profiles that data brokers have created about them. Now, some of this information can be relatively benign. It can be things like, do you like dogs? Do you like cats? Are you a gardener? Or are you a hunting person? Relatively benign. But it can also be very sensitive. It can be things like, are you an urban dweller who's struggling to make it on a single income? Are you a Spanish speaker who isn't really fluent in English? And these are categories. Are you an elderly person who may have certain kind of conditions, medical conditions? These are categories that can be used by people to harm consumers. Can be, this is information that can be purchased, and people can become victims of payday lending scams, medical scams, all sorts of scams. And we have brought these cases. We have brought cases where data brokers have provided information to entities that were not using it for appropriate purposes, were using it to harm people. But in addition, it just means that there's a lot of information out there about consumers that they don't understand, don't know about, and have not yet been able to exercise appropriate control over it.
So in the IoT, the explosion of IoT
Right.
just feeds more and more data into those repositories that they're analyzing, right? That's sort of
Exactly. It's a lot more data, and it's a lot more personal data. It could be health information, it could be information about your home, when you're there, when you're not, what kind of devices you're using, all of which could be used to make sensitive inferences about you too. So it's not just the data itself, but it's the inferences that can be made from that data. So absolutely, it's much more sensitive. And that's why I just think consumers need to be made more aware of it. There needs to be much more transparency and control given to consumers.
You probably hear this all the time, but when I talk to people and tell them about what we do, they say, well, what do I have to, I don't have anything to hide, so I'm not really worried about my privacy online. What's your answer to that?
My answer is that, I'm not saying that this is necessarily nefarious information. It's not just information about you, it's who has that information, right? So how much you earn, what kind of cars you drive, where you live, who your neighbors are, whether your neighbors are tax deadbeats or aren't paying their bills, and therefore inferences are being made about you. I just don't think consumers understand the depth of this information and how it can implicate them when it comes to sensitive decisions about them. So I would say look, I don't think I have anything to hide. I'm guessing you don't have anything to hide. But it's not so much that you don't have anything to hide, it's just how this relatively benign information can be used to make sensitive decisions about you and you're not aware of it. That's really the problem.
So as you mentioned, and I mentioned, our panel later today, which everyone here should come to at 3:30, is on IoT. We're going to be talking a lot more about the issues
Absolutely.
of where the data is going, how it's being collected,
Absolutely.
what you think should be done from a regulatory point of view. What we won't be talking about, or maybe we will, is the Apple versus FBI case and how that intersects. I don't even know how it intersects with IoT. But going forward, it could certainly set a precedence that affects IoT makers. But I wanted to get, this is just us friends here, your take on that. Well, you have, and I asked because you have said publicly what.
So last week, in the middle of the week, what I said was, and I still hold this view, that I'm deeply worried about the magical thinking that seems to be taking hold. And the magical thinking that I'm concerned about is that somehow a vulnerability can be created and we can control who has access to that vulnerability. I'm worried, look, I'm not saying it's impossible, but every technologist I've spoken to said they don't see how it can be done. So if that's true and it can't really be controlled, what I worry about is here you have agencies like ours, many other agencies that are saying much more security needs to be implemented for consumers to help them have more control over their data and make sure their data and their devices are secure. And yet we're also talking about vulnerabilities, and it's mixed messages coming from government, and that I think for the developing community can be difficult. But also ultimately, I really want to make sure that if magical thinking takes hold, if there really is a unicorn out there, let's make sure that it really works. But I'm not yet convinced that it can work, and right now I think it is magical thinking.
Interesting. We just have a little bit of time here, but I wanted to see if anybody out here, you guys, want to have any questions for the commissioner, and if not, let's see. What do we want to talk about? Tacos? Your favorite taco place? Have you eaten any good food?
I did go to a Mexican place. It was great, but I also went to. There's some really cool restaurants here.
Yes.
I mean, really cool. I had a great dinner last night, and I love Austin, but I just haven't been to South by before. So it's a great experience. It's really fun.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much, and. We'll see everyone here at 3:30.
See y'all at 3:30.
At the Marriott, session 3 and 4, something like that. It's on our website. You'll find it. We'll be tweeting about it. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.